Welcome to this first of a series of Commencement Forum. My name is Chong-Yi Tan. I'm a professor of physics. This year I've been on loan to help others to run Year of China, and this has been a very wonderful experience. And today we have a special Commencement Forum. It's a celebration of a Chinese student exchange coming to Brown over the last century. Almost 9 months ago, and it's more than 100 events later, we're now approaching the very last formal events associated with Year of China. So since most of you may or may not have had a personal experience to go through some of the events, perhaps I'll just say a few words about what we have done, take a retrospective look of how far we have traveled and what may lay ahead of us in the coming years. So before we start the more formal aspect of today's events. Now, before I move on, I just want to recognize two special guests here. First is Dr. Liu Zhao Han, who is a winner of 2012 Horace Mann Medal. He will be giving a commencement forum later today. Another special guest is Dr. Yang Wei, who is currently president of Zhejiang University. Both are Brown's alums. And Dr. Yang will give also another commencement forum at 1 o'clock, and he's also this year's honorary degree winner that will be awarded tomorrow. In honor of their coming to this particular event, I will have a special gift for them. So when you came in, you're given a raffle ticket. So some of those lucky ones, if you stay through the events, you will have a chance to win the mug before you leave. Let me just say a few words about what we have done. The Year of China slogan is opening doors and open minds. This catchphrase has steered us well as we set our goal for the program and organized various events over the past years. We hope what we have done will continue to be a guide in the planning and shaping of Brown's future. Nearly 6 years ago, under the leadership of President Simmons and then Provost Kurtzer, together with Vice President Matt Gutman of International Affairs, Brown began a serious focus on internationalization. We recognize that in order for Brown to be a leading national and international institution, Brown's curriculum and research emphasis must be increasingly global. For our future, it is essential to make Brown more a part of the world, a world in which the Chinese presence is immense. The Year of China is a natural extension of Brown's strategic initiative of internationalization. Over the past years, we have considered China in the broadest possible terms: its culture, history, people, geography, neighbors, and its relation to the world. This particular perspective incorporated the historical homeland as well as Greater China, a term which includes this community whose history traces its migratory roots back to China. Our program has a dual purpose, which is to introduce our community to Chinese culture and to examine China's current and future roles on the world stage. Throughout the year, we have explored the rich culture, economy, politics of Greater China by investigating its past, examining its present, and contemplating its future. We examine China's historical past through many events that were part of our program entitled Creating, Discovering, and Producing. Then we have moved on to other events, and we focused also on contemporary China. We organized various events under China in the World. The recent and extraordinary growth of China has had far-reaching impact. Educational exchange has played a prominent role in China's development, and Brown has benefited from these exchanges. China's place in the world is a result of exchanges in all domains of human activities. We have highlighted the reciprocity and relational process at work. One of the most powerful aspects of the Year of China initiative was learning about the stories of individuals. Our slogan, opening doors, opening minds, took on a very personal meaning when applied to the experience of individuals. This year is the 100th anniversary of the first Chinese student to graduate from Brown. You will have a chance later to hear from an interview we had with the granddaughter of the first person who graduated from Brown in 1912. Interestingly, in fact, this Miss Eileen Bian, we interviewed her about a month ago. Last night at a dinner, I found out that Dr. Liu got his PhD from Brown in 1965. Speaking of a personal story, he met his wife at that time. She was a graduate student also at Brown about that period. And we just learned that his wife shared the same house with Elaine about that time. So what a small world. I would like to encourage all of you here today, particularly to those class of 2012, both undergrads and graduates, to continue to expand your understanding of China and the ramifications of her multifaceted role in the world. Throughout this initiative, we recognized that futures of America and China are inextricably intertwined. Thus, part of what we have explored was, in some sense, really about ourselves, that is, about America. We could not have achieved all this, what we have done, without the support of many people. I would like to particularly acknowledge President Simmons' role. She has been very helpful, providing guidance, in particular, in this time of fiscal challenges. She has always tried to tell me, you can always do more with less. And I hopefully, with the help of Matt Gutman's International Affairs Office, we have indeed fulfilled the wish of guidance of President Simmons. It is essential that we nourish the endeavor to understand China's history, culture, economy, and politics, so relationships can be forged and grow in mutually beneficial way. It is our sincere hope that the incoming President, Paxson, will embrace this effort. And with that said, and with the reminder that there will be a drawing or raffle at the end, so you can win this beautiful mug, I would like to turn this over to Vice President Matt Gutman to introduce formally our panelists, and this will be a panel. This goes through, and at the end, we'll have a Q&A session, so you have a chance to ask more interesting personal questions. Okay, Matt.
Thank you, Changyi. It's really, for those of you who have been around this year, I don't think Brown will ever be the same with respect to China. The fact is that we can now say that no student will graduate from Brown without knowing a lot about the culture, history, and language of China. And though this has been a year of China, we intend to make it a permanent part of our curriculum and a permanent part of our relationship with leading universities in China like Zhejiang University. And we are very honored to have both President Liu and President Yang with us today. The ties that we have throughout China, throughout Greater China, are really a very important part of what it means today for Brown to be a global university. It is my real personal pleasure to introduce the first speaker today. Born in Tokyo, Ruby Shang graduated from Brown in 1971. I believe she must have been about 10 or 12 at the time. She's a member of Brown's Advisory Council on Asia and other major university bodies. Most importantly, however, she has a daughter, Zana, who's graduating today. Here's Zana. Oh, sorry, graduating tomorrow. You're not done yet. Ruby joined the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative in 2004. As country director for China in 2005, she started up the Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative programs in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Indonesia. I actually had the opportunity recently to be both in Singapore and to travel to Indonesia with her, and her ties are indeed impressive and opening up many opportunities for Brown throughout the region. In her spare time, she also has spent time in Papua New Guinea as regional director for Asia. Ruby today is Director Asia of the William J. Clinton Foundation. And typical Brown grad that she is, in addition to her work on health and climate change, Ruby's had an amazing career in and around dance. She was chair of the dance panel of the New York Council for the Arts, faculty at Juilliard and Tisch at NYU, and recipient of NEA, Rockefeller, Fulbright Hayes, and other prestigious fellowships. So I'm really delighted that she was able to work this talk into her busy schedule this weekend. And this is going to kick off our discussion of from 1912 to 2012, celebrating 100 years of exchange between Brown and China. Please welcome Ruby Shang.
Thank you, Matt. I'm delighted to be here, and we are very lucky to have someone like Matt leading our charge, expanding internationally for Brown. And I've seen him in action, and I can absolutely vouch for how wonderful he is in the field, dealing with government partners and Ministry of Education officials and so on. So thank you, Matt, for all of the great work you're doing. And thank you, Cheng-Yi, for inviting me to speak today. After you invited me, I started thinking about what should I say and what would make a difference. And I realized that I had to go a little bit further beyond 1967. Oh my gosh. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot about what life was like growing up in post-war Japan with a Japanese mother, Chinese father, and going to an American school. So we were completely dysfunctional. We did not share one common language. Communication was circular in the sense that, everything went through my mother. And it was truly traditional in the sense that my father was very remote and totally uninvolved in what was going on in the family. And we spoke English amongst each other, the siblings, because we went to ASIJ, the American school in Japan. We spoke Japanese to our mother, and she spoke Mandarin to my father, and he spoke a smattering of Chinese, English, and Japanese to us, but primarily English. So it really means that the power of the English language and the effect of American education was critical to my family and to me. So my daughter Zana says that we could have been an ideal family to study for her sociology class about the family. So it was from her questions, actually, about my Japanese side of the family that I had never examined before because my father was such a strong character. And it turned out that on my mother's side of the family, the patriarch was Yasuda Zenjiro, who almost single-handedly started the insurance industry in Japan over 100 years ago, and also happened to be Yoko Ono's grandfather. So cousin Yoko and I never met, but it's been an interesting journey finding out things about my family that I had never thought about or considered because of Zana's sociology class. So, you know, they disinherited her because of her work with the avant-garde world and Fluxus, as well as her marriage to John Lennon. But because my mother came from the very poor side of the Yasuda family, when I graduated from Brown and started dancing with Paul Taylor and met members of the Fluxus organization, no one seemed to care. So how did we get to be such a dysfunctional and culturally interesting family? So on my Chinese side, my grandfather passed away when my father was 3, and leaving my grandmother, whom I never met, with a very difficult task of educating her son. So ultimately, she made the very wise decision to send him to the Baoding Military Academy, which was tuition-free. So this is where he first came to know Chiang Kai-shek. And then he went to, in his teens, he even went to Japan to study at the Imperial Military Academy in Tokyo. So there he met Sun Yat-sen. And I am not just dropping these names, it just happens to be part of my family history. So I want to reassure you that I'm not trying to drop names and impress you in any way. So he joined the student movement and fought in the revolution of 1911. And you all know the history of the revolution of 1911. But because of his firm belief in and support of Sun Yat-sen, when he was still a teenager, my father continued to believe in the 3 principles of the people's doctrine: nationalism, democracy, and social welfare. So he believed that Chinese should not be fighting against each other, the communists and the Kuomintang. And so he was very protective of his officers who were known to be communist sympathizers, and he sent supplies to the communist leadership, medicine, blankets, clothing, to support them during the Long March. And among other events, he also saved Zhou Enlai's life. And so for those accomplishments, he was invited to return as a revolutionary hero. And he realized the power of the English language early on, and he studied with a British tutor. And so he became one of the few high-ranking Kuomintang officials who could speak English, other than Madame Chiang Kai-shek. And so for this, he was rewarded with various appointments. He became chief of the Chinese mission to the United States. He was chief of the military staff committee that was early in the formation of the United Nations, and then he ended as his career as chief of the Chinese mission in Japan during the occupation. So the English language, and certainly in American education, influenced not only my father, but key Chinese leaders then and now. So Sun Yat-sen's ideology, he spent his years from 13 to 17 in Hawaii. He was educated in Hawaii, and he learned about American democracy and the thoughts championed by Abraham Lincoln. He even gives Lincoln credit in terms of the Gettysburg Address as an inspiration for his 3 principles. So he wrote about the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, literally just, that exact phrase. And this is a slight digression, but that Ho Chi Minh from Vietnam, when he first, during his inaugural speech of the new Republic of Vietnam in 1945, he also quoted the Declaration of Independence. So the United States and American democracy has had significant influence in Asia. So again, in terms of using his English, Sun Yat-sen raised funds in the United States and Europe for his revolution. And Madame Chiang Kai-shek's influence was also due to her command of English. So she was the first woman, Chinese woman, to speak, first Chinese to speak to the House of Congress, and the second woman to speak to the U.S. Congress. So this is all because of her amazing command of English. And as I was getting ready to apply to college, my father kept mentioning that Madame Chiang Kai-shek had attended Wellesley College. And I interpret this to mean that he really wanted me to go to Wellesley. He didn't dare tell me to go, but he kept saying, you know, Madame Chiang went to Wellesley College. And I had other ideas. I thought a girls' school like Pembroke, connected to a men's school like Brown, was really great. And also it seemed to be in a nice area of the United States. I had never been. I mean, college tours did not exist in those days. So, but I also was considering going to a tiny college called Kalamazoo College in Michigan, because I had a boyfriend from high school who was there. So I was torn, and I confided, not in my parents, but in the headmaster of the American school in Japan at the time, a very wise and wonderful man, Bill Ricketson. And he said just the right thing to me. He said, you know, Brown's been at it for a really long time. Maybe you should give them a chance. So I did, and I came to Brown when the curriculum reform was being debated, and then 2 years later it was implemented. Students were banging out drafts of the document on typewriters with carbon paper for copies. And Ira Magaziner used to sit in the lobby of the Rockefeller Library. And in those pre-internet days, everyone had to go to the library. So he would give assignments to all the students that were going in and out of the library. And that's how, you know, business was done for the curriculum reform. And he and Elliot Maxwell were lobbying the corporation to adopt the curriculum. And by my senior year, I was really fortunate enough to benefit significantly from it. And those years defined much of what happened afterwards, not only for Brown, but for my life. And I'm forever grateful. So I can synthesize what Brown, the exceptional qualities of Brown, in one meeting that we had for the Clinton Health Access Initiative. We didn't have very many meetings because they were expensive and our costs were always very low, and so it was a rare global meeting of all managers in Ethiopia. And there were several people from a Harvard class of 98 or something like that. But none of them knew each other. And so those of us from Brown said, well, we would not only know each other, we're here because of each other. And that's, I think, the uniqueness of Brown. This is a community that is forever, and it's relationships that are forever. And so many times I talk to different alumni all over the world, and very often I hear the phrase, I would be a different person had it not been for Brown. You know, I am who I am today because of Brown. And so these are wonderful things to hear. And I owe so much. And every day I am very grateful for the experience I've had at Brown, the relationships I've had here, the friendships, the mentors I've had, from Julie Stramberg in the dance department to Richard Fishman in the art department to John Amy from the theater department. We were so close. We worked together. We thought about things together. We performed together. We created together. And the cross-cultural issues in terms of, you know, departmental cross-cultural issues were all hashed out, and we talked about how to make this new curriculum work. And when but what was the wider macro context in 1967? So just a year before I came to Brown, Mao had launched the Cultural Revolution. The rural population of China in 1967 was approximately 80% of the total population. And today, China's urban population has nearly surpassed 50%, with the number of Chinese living in towns and cities expected to rise over 700 million by 2015. I mean, this is very significant. At the end of 2010, the total number of internet users was 457 million, a 73 million increase in 1 year. And of the internet users, 32% are 10 to 19-year-olds. So they are the future, they are our hope, and as these internet users increase, as more than 32% start to use the internet, the applications to Brown are going to increase as well. So Brown has changed dramatically from 1967 to the year of China. And during my 4 years at Brown, according to university records, from 67 to 71, there were only 18 Asian students at Brown, and including all the graduate schools. So today, Brown receives 1,000 undergraduate applications from China alone, not counting all the other Asian countries. So thanks to Matt's work, thanks to Professor Cheng-Yi, Brown is expanding way beyond the borders of the United States, and we are truly an international institution. And among all the things that I've learned at Brown is how to lead a flexible life, to have many hats, and to juggle so many different aspects of life, from career to personal to family to personal growth, and as well as family growth and development. And I'm forever grateful, and I think that in the future, as you graduate and go into the world, you will also hold these principles that you've learned at Brown. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity today. Thank you very much. And you can ask me any question you want later.
In the undergraduate program, Brown did indeed receive well over 1,000 applications from China. I'm delighted to say that 40 students will be in the freshman class from China starting next fall. This is the largest number, not only from China, but of any country outside the US. We should add, however, that they're not only numerous, but they're some of our top students today across the spectrum, both in the sciences, social sciences, and humanities. Interestingly, and perhaps not surprisingly, many of the students coming from China initially think they're going to study sciences. They get here, and often some of them change their mind, as it happens with many of the students who show up at Brown. They've never been exposed. They've never even heard of some of the subjects that they find here. I'm now going to introduce John Eng Wang, who's a special advisor to Brown's International MA program in American Studies. He's the founding director of the Office of International Students and Scholar Services, which may not ring a bell to you, but I can say that all the visas that are processed in this university so well happen and start in that office. And he's today an affiliate of the Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity. And at the center today, he's researching immigration archives focused on the Chinese heritage community in Rhode Island in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. John's going to speak today about educational exchange and the first Chinese students to attend Brown in the early 20th century. Please welcome John Eng Wang. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Let me begin by pointing out a few happy coincidences. Cheng-Yi has already mentioned that marks the 100th anniversary of the graduation of the first Chinese students. Actually, there were two who graduated from Brown in 1912. It's also a happy coincidence, I think, that this classroom happens to be the meeting place for a class in the sociology of the family. And I think Ruby has started with that theme, and it's one that I will continue to talk about in some ways. A third coincidence is that this is also my 50th reunion year. So I graduated from Brown in 1962, and I think I share with Ruby the perspective of the important relationships that have come out of knowing my classmates and sharing a lifetime with them. Thirdly, it is also a coincidence that this marks the 50th year in which Brown has had a curriculum teaching the Chinese language. And that's an important milestone for the university because I think that gave us the opportunity to open up connections with China and in many different ways. And the academic pathways that have been developed with the Chinese-speaking world, of course, have been multiplied because of that program. And at the beginning of the year of China, I think it had been my hope that we could begin to document the history of Chinese relationships with the university. And it was really in a process of discovery. And in that, I think I want to mention in particular that we've had the help of Jocelyn Richards, who's a graduate of the class of 2012, who studies Chinese and who has done a great deal to help us in mounting all the programs. And I think you'll see a part of her work later on as we listen to some of the voices from the alumni body. Now, actually, I saw my purpose as somewhat broader than just depicting some stories from the lives of early graduates of the college, and I think I'm going to try to build two bridges very quickly here. One is to sketch out in the barest form the fact that the flourishing of the university's relationships with China have occurred really over the last half century, in part because of a growing interest on the part of Chinese students in developing a practical basis for the improvement of their homeland. And in the beginning of that 50-year period, well, actually 60 years, let's say, counting from the end of World War II, there was a flurry of enrollment in the graduate school, and very quickly that enrollment or that flow of students was cut off because relationships were ended between the U.S. and the mainland of China, which became the People's Republic. There was, however, a quick resuscitation of the connections because of the beginnings of work that tied Taiwan to the United States. And sitting in the audience today, we have one of the products, the winner of the Horace Mann Medal, Professor Liu, is one of that generation of Taiwan scholars who came to the United States, studied here and went home. And then after 1980, there's been also a great acceleration of activity between the United States and China. And I was able to witness that from my professional chair at Brown and enable the growth of a whole wide variety of connections. And President Wei Yang is here to represent, I think, that generation of accomplishment today. But as you see on the screen before you, there are some people who predated that time. And this is a list drawn from the historical catalog of 1950 of the university. And I've gone through that list and tried to identify each Chinese name. That was, I think I've done it with at least 90% accuracy. And the names that you see up there, the names in small type happen to come from the first 5 enrollees. They came in 1906. They came from the Tianjin University, and none of them stayed. That summer of 1906, there were 40 students who actually came to the United States from Tianjin. They were schooled at Harvard in English, and then they dispersed to a variety of institutions across the country, actually throughout the Northeast. 5 of them came to Brown. And of those, one studied serially at Brown, Yale, Columbia, and Iowa, where he took a degree in railway engineering. A second went from Brown to Yale, where he finished a bachelor's, and then to Chicago for a law degree. And the other 3 left after a year to go to the Sheffield School of Science in New Haven, attached to Yale. So it wasn't until 1907 when the first person who was going to graduate from Brown, let's see if I can change this, his name at that time was Zuen Sun Bien. Later in life, he adopted the use of another name, Bien Bai Mei. And actually, during his lifetime, we lost track of him. Not uncommon for people who were that far away from the university. There were not strong ties, and correspondence was infrequent. But Zuen Sun Bien had a good habit. He happened to feel very kindly about his experience at Brown, and he continued to send members of his family to the university. Now, you see Zuen Sun's picture. He's second from the right in this gallery. Now, he, like other students who came to Brown in this early age, had the ambition of studying a topic that would have a practical value for their country and for their individual futures. So Zuen Sun concentrated in political economy. He was also here with a family. In fact, he had come with his wife in 1907 to study English, which he did in Ithaca High School. And sort of to catch on to the theme of the English language, Zuen Sun decided to come to Brown because he looked around the landscape of U.S. institutions, and he heard that there were very few Chinese students at Brown. So he imagined that this would be a place where, in fact, he could perfect his English. And he chose deliberately to come to a place where there were few of his countrymen to share the campus. Now, it so happened that Ralph Sun, who was on the right-hand side of the screen in front of you, also came to Brown, but actually after Zuen Sun enrolled here. He went first to MIT, where he picked up some practical scientific knowledge and technical knowledge, and then he came here to study economics. So these 2 gentlemen graduated in 1912, 100 years ago, and I think we can safely say that Zuen Sun Bien was the first Chinese graduate because his name starts with B. Now, these pictures are drawn from a story that was published in the Providence Sunday Journal, October 15th, 1911. The headline, this is a feature story in section 4 of the Sunday supplement. So the headline said, Brown's Versatile Chinese Quartet. Okay. And there were actually 2 other gentlemen who enrolled in Brown at that point. One of them happened to play football and actually takes up the bulk of the story. he didn't end up a player, actually. But this is what they had to say about Zuesun Bien. Bien undoubtedly typifies best the spirit of his awaking land. He is one of the keenest foreigners ever enrolled at Brown, and when he is graduated next June, he will have made a record comparable with that of any of his brightest classmates. And indeed, he was graduated as a James Manning Scholar. Now, the sociology of the family. I think it was amazing in 1911 to be enrolled as a family man. College students at that time did not have families. And it was quite extraordinary for the reporter to think that this gentleman and wife had not only a child at home, they had left a 7-year-old in the care of the grandparents, but also were able to birth a child. Actually, this young person here, Edward Bien, was not the first Chinese child born in Providence, but among probably the first half dozen of Chinese to be born here. And the family theme, I think, is important because I think the feelings that are generated on this campus did create a tie and a parallel, I think, to the kind of community that Chinese prize. So let's listen to Zuensun's granddaughter.
My uncle came shortly after. I think his graduation date was very soon after my grandfather's. And then my father and his twin brother came. And the reason they came was because I think there was a connection between their undergraduate school, which was Shanghai College, and Brown. They were both Baptist affiliated schools at that time. And so they came, and the other part, of course, was that my grandfather had been here. And so they came. And they had graduated from Shanghai College, and but they had to do their undergraduate somewhat again, but maybe not all of it. So they both graduated around 1928, and then they went on to graduate school at Brown.
Now, as is the case in most families, she gets some of that story wrong. Her uncle did come shortly after. Fu Sun Bien graduated in the class of 1917. Both of those early Biens went on in the banking industry. And the senior Bien, this was actually the younger brother of Zuesun. The older brother went on to become the manager of the branch of the Bank of China in Tianjin. And you can read a little about his career in the program. But he was a very important figure in the early construction of a banking system in China. His brother also went back and worked with the Bank of China in Beijing, as did Ralph Sun, who was graduated with Zuesun, but Ralph Sun ultimately went into the flour business, wheat flour, in Shanghai. Now, I've marked in red here the succession of the Bien family that followed up until 1950. There was sort of a renegade in here, Richard Pang Bien, who graduated, I think, in the class of 1924. Went on to earn a PhD at MIT and is remembered in the family as the communist. Okay. He went back. He actually returned to Brown for a sabbatical year in the 1940s, and then went back to China and stayed there. The Zue Sun Bien branch of the family left after liberation, moved to Hong Kong, then Taiwan, and came ultimately to California. But as you can see there are also twin brothers. They actually came in 1928, the first, and then the second of the twins came later. Actually, he finished his undergraduate degree in China and then came and did graduate work at the university here. And the family piece of this is an important one because, as you saw, Elaine was the fourth generation, and the fifth generation of the family, there was Elaine's daughter who graduated from Brown in 1995. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Now, when Sun Sun Bien first settled in Providence, he visited the small Chinese precincts to make the acquaintance of his countrymen. They did not speak the same language. They communicated through writing. And while we do not know much about any relationships that might have developed or not, one story passed down in the family, oral history, was that there was disagreement about identity, historical identity, a disagreement that mapped onto regional divisions and language difference. This chart displays that divide. In blue are the descendants of the immigrant generations from China. The first two, King Tao and Walter Francis Wong, were sons of restaurateurs who established economic beachheads in Rhode Island. King Tao was the son of Cho Chit Sam, the manager of the King Fong restaurant, Sunway Bassett Street. Because the Chinese exclusion laws prohibited migration, barriers were in place to restrict the movement of Chinese to the U.S. Students were exempt from these restrictions, but the sons of restaurant managers were not. This affidavit, filed in 1921, certifies that King Tao was in fact the son of a merchant, which allowed him to enter the country. Within 5 years, King Tao had established himself as a student with prospects, and in the fall of 1926, he entered Brown University. He did not stay. After a year, he transferred to MIT. Family lore has it that Brown's swimming requirement forced the move to Cambridge. King Tao's relationship to Brown did not end, however. Christmas cards kept him in touch even after he decided to return to China to pursue a career and to start a family. War interrupted and complicated those plans, but at war's end, a gesture from the U.S. government opened an immigration channel for Chinese who had the promise of a job. A Christmas card connection to a Brown freshman roommate brought the offer of a job and opened a chance to re-enter the United States. It changed the direction of the rest of King Tao's life. And this story made me think about the comments about friendship spoken by Zuen Sun Bien in 1911. This is what he said. "Friendship is one of the finest things about college life. It will not hurt us to have some of it in our own schools. It helps men understand each other, and when men do that, they will be better able to work together for the good of their country." Let's listen to one last clip about friendship.
There were no books, no textbooks, and he was teaching thermodynamics, and he had no books. He had to teach it from memory. And so he, because of his connections at Brown with his lab cronies, he wrote to one of them, who was a very good friend of his. It was Professor Force of Yale University. And he said, "We don't have any books, and I have to teach thermodynamics from memory." and that's not good. I can't really remember all of that. So Professor Force actually collected a whole bunch of books, maybe the discarded texts that they no longer need or whatever, but sent them.
So there you have the fruits of friendship. And I think I remember very vividly one comment from a graduate student who was talking about her life at Brown. And she said, I love Brown. It gave me the opportunity to make my own family. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Julia Yueshan is a concentrator in applied mathematics and economics who's going to finish her degree in December this year. Julia is going to talk today about some of the amazing work she's done on a documentary, Across the Seas, which reveals the personal challenges and accomplishments of two Chinese students who started at Brown just last fall, charting their journey from home and their adaptations to life at Brown and the United States. I actually first met Julia and had a chance to see this in Shanghai last January, and the students have been working very hard, and we had a premiere just a couple weeks ago, I think, which was overflow crowd. So I hope we'll get a chance to see a few excerpts today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming on this lovely Saturday morning after campus dance. So my name is Julia Yueshan. I'm a senior at Brown. It's about 1.5 years ago, my roommate Shixi and I found that there isn't many films that truthfully shows the exchange experience of Chinese students in America. So we decided to make one by our own. So we selected 2 students from class 2015. They were just accepted at that time, and we decided to track them for the last week they were in China before they come to US, and their first month's experience when they're in Brown. So one of our student subject, Blair, who is actually never been to America before she came to Brown, and she applied everything through the internet. Let's watch a short clip first.
Not international though. They're usually either from California or somewhere in the United States.
I don't really have any close Chinese international friends.
No, can't say I have.
I'm Blair.
Blair?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Georgie.
Hey, this is my roommate. Her name is Apple. She's really cool, except she just bought a really ugly Vampire Diaries poster.
Well, I guess I feel like international students group together.
Some of them do form bonds with each other.
Coming from the same place, it's probably easier to find the same interests and become friends with those.
Because they understand cultural cues, or they also just speak the same language.
But actually, we do want to know people outside.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do go maybe we are shy or they are shy, so we really don't talk to each other.
You have to be very bold. You have to show what kind of person you are to them instead of being asked by them or waiting to be taken into the conversation with them.
平时交朋友是不是这种方式，所以反而会觉得挺累的。就是你要总会，大学生都很酷嘛，你要是学会美国那个酷的方式，才能真正跟他们相处好。
I'm Blair. I'm a freshman as well. I don't know what I'm going to concentrate in.
You have to really understand their pop culture, and you have to watch TV shows that they usually watch. So there's definitely some jokes, and I had no idea about. But it's fine. I can tell jokes that they don't understand.
So he's talking about like you get drunk every day or something in Chinese, which I don't. I never.
我特别想认识法国人。
啊，你要吗？我介绍给你。
好啊，要不然我法语全被我丢光了。
我觉得他长得特别像哈利波特。不想家，就是那开学典礼嘛。然后他们家长就一路就high five，然后我就拍了一路家长的手，然后我想我爸我妈没来，然后就特难过。然后我就在想，毕业典礼的时候可以让奶奶爷爷什么都来。
I hope you all enjoyed the show.
Not international though. They're usually.
All right. So although the documentary is about the life of these two girls, but a lot of their experiences are actually shared by most of the Chinese international students here, or perhaps international students in general. For example, so Apple said she really hoped her parents could come for her graduation. And I have the exactly same feeling in my opening convocation when I just attended college. When my parents couldn't attend that day, I was having the same thing, thinking, when it's my time of graduation, my parents have to be here. So it's my first time my mom actually made her trip to US today and coming to this talk. Thanks, Mom, for coming. So I was told to talk about some struggles and challenges that Chinese students would meet when they come here. So I guess the first thing would be the language barrier. So although we have been learning English since we were in elementary school, but what we learn in textbook would always be different from what the language we use in real life. So in the documentary, Apple has been experiencing this, that her friends was telling her that you're the shit. She has no idea what that is, and she thought that's some cursing word. I was being told I was the nuts, and I have no idea what that is. Yeah, so all this language that we saying that we would never learn in a textbook, and it gives such a big challenge when we were here. And Apple found herself most comfortable and confident in her French class, because in her French class, people speak French and no one really speaks English. So she found herself is the same as everyone else, and she no longer feel herself like a foreigner in that group. And Blair got a writing check in her when she just came in, so she was forced to take a writing class. And during her class, she found this conclusion of a good essay, the difference between a good essay in China and a good essay in America. So apparently in America, you're supposed to assume that your readers does not really, you assume your readers don't know anything, so you explain things really clearly. However, in China, the more you hide, the better the essay is. So it's completely different. And she's learning all those when she's here. And Apple is one of those popular kids in China. She does not need to approach others, while others would always approach her and want to make friends with her. And she finds it really frustrating when she comes to America, because she has to try really hard to make friends here, to approach others, and just to do the things that she never do in China. And sometimes she even feels pretty awkward in a group because she couldn't understand the American jokes. She doesn't watch the TV show that they usually watch, and she does not know the music. So it makes the communication even harder. So before we were able to building up our friendship and community here, we're seeking a lot of emotional support from our family. And one thing that makes our generation quite different is that we're the only child in the family. So it makes us have a lot of extra love and attention from the big family, and it also makes us bonded very closely with our parents. So when I just came here, I have to pretty much call my parents every day. to have to talk to them and feel like I was supported. I heard about my American friends complaining that, they were from California, so they were complaining that coming to Brown, there's 3-hour difference and made it really hard to call friends back to California. So imagine in China, there is 12-hour difference. And so whenever I have to call my parents, it's either the time they were working or the time they were sleeping. So even seeking support from the family is getting harder. And the last thing, which I think is the biggest challenge when we come to Brown, is the models of success and the Brown education. So when I was in China, I was told to always go to the best schools and get the best jobs, which refers to being a doctor, a lawyer, a business person, or engineer. So that makes my concentration pretty much to be something like in finance or engineering, computer science, or go to medical schools. However, in Brown, I was encouraged to explore different classes and to find the passion that I really have, to find the things that I really like. That's been quite challenging to me, honestly. One side, I want to be practical, I want to be career-oriented, I wanted to be a good kid from my parents' side. On the other hand, I also want to find who I am, what I really want to do. From my observation, a lot of Chinese students, they take 2 majors. One major they like, another major is practical. So I have lots of friends who studies economics and visual arts, economics and environmental science. So I guess that worked out very well. So it sounds like it's really hardcore coming to America for all these struggles. But I've been asking a lot of friends if they regret the decision they ever make, if they regret coming here. And they were telling me that even let them to choose another 100 times, they would still come to US. Changes are always hard, but once you get used to the changes, once you adapt the things here, we start to really enjoy the freedom here. We enjoy the diversity, the open mind in this society. And I really like the Brown community.
How about 5 minutes?
Just a few minutes.
5 minutes for questions, that's okay?
Yep.
Great. So all 3 of our speakers today would be delighted to hear any questions you might have. I should add also that the documentary is about an hour long. You just saw just the barest little part of it. So, any comments, questions? Yes, please.
What percentage of the graduates return to China?
I don't know. But the other thing is you have to look the year after graduation, 5 years after, things like that. Because I know that a number of our international students do stay in the U.S., some to go on to school elsewhere in graduate school, some to just get a job somewhere. And then after 5 years or so, many will return. I will say that the so-called brain drain that we've experienced for decades is actually in reverse now in many ways. We're seeing a lot of our students born and raised in the U.S. now leave the U.S. after graduation and go get jobs in China, India, and other places.
I just may add, like Dr. Liu has to leave for the next foreign. He was a professor at the University of Illinois for many, many years before recruited back to Taiwan to serve as the president of the university.
Other comments, questions? Yes, please.
First of all, my English is not so good, so I try to make myself understood. My question is whether there's some reason of diversity for the master and the PhD education. Does Brown want to adopt the students from other graduates from universities, from different universities. Is that one policy or something like that?
You're talking about people would come from other countries, for instance, and study graduate school here?
No, just one example. For example, a Chinese student graduate from Brown, and maybe he would pursue a higher degree. Is it the first choice for him to pursue the higher degree in Brown or in other university? Or Brown, the university, you have some, priority to adopt the students from other universities such as Stanford, MIT, Central. My two questions.
Okay, if I understood correctly, and perhaps somebody else can help me if I didn't, we would encourage students to study in various different universities. So we're often very interested in having our undergraduates study elsewhere and having students who've studied elsewhere come to our graduate programs. There are exceptions to that, but that's a general rule. My undergraduate and graduate degree are actually from the same institution, from the University of California, Berkeley, and that was fine. I studied two completely different things, but I think that in general, the approach in the United States in higher education would be to expose people to different kinds of ideas, different methods that you would learn in different universities in that way. Does that help?
Thanks a lot, because I noticed from the list of the name and the graduate from Brown, there is no indication it's a graduate student or master's student or PhD. Yeah. So I would like to know maybe some statistics about your students' distribution.
John, do you know?
In the early years, all of those students were in the undergraduate college. So, and it wasn't until after World War II that there was any significant enrollment of Chinese students in the graduate school. But beginning in the late war years, 44, 45, there were many Chinese students who came to Brown and studied and then went home to China. And ultimately some of those ended up in Taiwan as well.
I would say today we have between 200 and 300 graduate students from China and under 100 undergraduates from China. So in fact, it's just the reverse. It's many more graduate students at this point, and that is typical of universities throughout the United States. There are about 170, 180,000 students from China studying in the U.S. today.
Thank you very much.
One more question, please.
Well, I think there are two kinds of Chinese students. One is like her, derived from China. Second is like my son, they are second generation immigrant. They're born in China, but they're raised in the United States. Any connection between two groups in the ground?
We're friends. Yeah, we hang out a lot. Well, it's interesting. In Brown, there's a Chinese Students Association, which is mainly managed by the second generation. And there's another CSSA, the Chinese Student and Scholars Association, which is mainly managed by the first generation student like me. So these two groups work together a lot, and we like each other.
There's actually a very good excerpt in the video about this question and how do the Chinese American students consider themselves Chinese American and all that. It's very good. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks to our panelists.
One class is done. We will have raffle drawing, and Julia and Ruby will do the drawing. Okay, very quickly.